Hi everybody, welcome to Big Joe's Journal. My name is Joe Tilden. I'm the host of this program. Well, the Rutland Fair is now in the rearview mirror, such as it was. And as we're here at the end of August, there are signs of fall. Mainly now if you watch TV, for example, yesterday afternoon, CBS carried a preseason football game, believe it or not, preseason football between the New Orleans Saints and the Los Angeles Chargers, who were formerly known as the San Diego Chargers. Well, LA won the game 19-17. So, I don't know, it just seems a little bit early, but, time moves on. And come September, we'll be into football season. If you're high school football here in Vermont, is going to be going full bore here in another couple of weeks. But this year, things just seem a little bit different. Being an old timer around the area, I'm used to the fair being Labor Day week. And it seems rather strange. You watch Channel 3, and they talk about they're looking forward to good weather for the fair. And here we look, and our fair this year is now history. Well, I didn't go to the fair, mainly because at my age, it's a little bit too difficult to get around. But I took a couple of trips by the fairgrounds, and they seem to be doing quite well. They had the weather with them, that's for sure. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, there seem to be quite a few cars down there. So hopefully the abbreviated version of the Rutland Fair is going to turn a profit. And once you turn a profit, then you're on your way back. Excuse me. Then you can start figuring out what you're going to do with the future and how you're going to handle things in the future and what the fair can do. And I think they're on the right track, trying to become more agricultural. I think the fair got away from this agricultural thing for a little bit, and that more or less hurt. So I think the idea of getting back, excuse me, getting back to what it should be, and that's an agricultural fair, is a step in the right direction. After all, the sponsor is the Rutland County Agricultural Society. One thing I would like to see the fair do is, there's a horse show in East Dorset, runs about 6 weeks. The end of July, August. It more or less parallels the thoroughbred track at Saratoga. I'd like to see them bring that horse show up to the Rutland Fairgrounds. There's some deep pockets in that organization. And where they set up in East Dorset, everything's temporary. It has to be set up, it has to be taken down. If they came up to the Rutland Fairgrounds, we can offer them a permanent setup. Building a permanent barn to house their horses. Barn that could be heated or cooled, whichever they wanted. You got a huge track. You got one of the largest grandstands in the state that is really, going to waste, not being used. And I think the fair itself, instead of having shows scattered around the grounds, I think the idea is to come back in front of the grandstand, put a stage back in front of the grandstand, and bring your displays back in front of this huge grandstand and make use of it. That's a great structure that's not being used. You could have your ox pulling, your horse pulling, your sheep show in front of the grandstand. You can have your horse demonstrations in front of the grandstand. boy, I'm not doing well here. And make great use of this. You know, it seems too bad it's only going to be used 2 or 3 times a year. It'd be a great place if you could lay sod down on the track. Say to have some high school football games played down there, especially your state championship games. Be all kinds of room for parking. Be plenty of room in the grandstand. And unlike Alumni Field, you wouldn't be getting a very, very cold wind blowing in from the west. These title games take place, of course, in November. And the weather in November in Vermont is unpredictable. But one thing is for sure, it's cold and it's windy. Well, if you had that grandstand, you'd still have cold. But you wouldn't be getting hit with a very cold west wind blowing in on the spectators watching that football game. Plus, there'd be plenty of room to park. So you wouldn't have to have space up and down Woodstock Avenue and run shuttle buses back and forth to get people to the ball game, get them back. Well, if you build a modern stage down there with locker rooms, that would handle that situation. It requires an investment, but I think it's an investment that in the long run would pay off. So that's my view. That's my view on that. And I would hope that the Board of Directors of the Rutland County Agricultural Society would look into making the fairground use more of a year-round thing and more of a great display case for agriculture, for 4-H, for FFA, Future Farmers of America, and organizations like that. That's a very valuable piece of property, and certainly we should be making more use out of it. Well, the political season, of course, moves on. The individual in the White House is sending out his usual brainless, ridiculous tweets. Right now, of course, he's at his golf club in New Jersey, where most of the employees are the type of people he's been trying to keep out of the country. In other words, they're unregistered aliens that are working at his golf club and at his other resorts. He's able to pay them under the pay scale with no benefits. And if they talk about quitting, he can always threaten to send them back home. Well, they need the money to send back home to support their families back in Mexico and Central America. So a very effective threat. But, I mean, it shows the hypocrisy of this administration. That they hire folks that are probably in the country illegally, and then they talk about throwing out people that have been born in this country, and are now American citizens, really. They want to send them back to a country that they're totally unfamiliar with. Also, his ridiculous tweets to those 2 congresswomen advising Israel, deny these people visas, don't let them in. And of course, Trump's equally ridiculous idiot Netanyahu there in Israel agrees. Well, he finally relented because there was a lot of pressure from the Jewish organizations here in this country saying this is not the country that we're supporting. And he relented and he said, the lady from Michigan, well, you can come in and visit your grandmother, but don't say anything bad about us. And she very correctly refused. And of course, the idiot that we have in the White House naturally has to get in his ridiculous 2 cents. He says, well, at least her grandmother doesn't have to put up with her. Well, her grandmother obviously wanted to see her, and she wanted to see her grandmother, their family, their blood. They're human beings. They're decent people, something that Trump isn't. never will be. But he continues on his ridiculous rants and everything else. And he keeps it up. I think he's digging his own grave in the long run. You still have people that support him. He still has a so-called base. Bunch of rednecks. Bunch of neo-Nazis. And there are some good people that support him, but you know, you can excuse ignorance. Say maybe after the mistake the country made in 2016, they would smarten up. And hopefully they will. Well, what Trump's got going for him is a thriving economy. But this economy is thriving because of policies from the Obama administration. Took the country that was in recession under George W. Bush, turned it around, got it back on track again, and now the economy is booming. The current occupant of the White House had nothing to do with it. But what he has had a lot to do with will be the huge depression that is coming and is predicted for sometime around 2020. His policies will lead us into that. And the next president will have to deal with it and deal with the problems that this current nincompoop is going to leave the country with. Will he be the nominee of the Republican Party? Unfortunately, yes. But I think there are a lot of Republicans that are beginning to have second thoughts, but I don't think they're organized well enough to make a change in their party and take it back from the kooks that have taken it over. Another guy that's got to go is the majority leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell. Well, you know, if Trump were Pinocchio, along with Mitch McConnell, Trump's case, he'd have a nose that would stretch from one end of the country to the other. And Mitch McConnell wouldn't be far behind. McConnell's up for re-election in Kentucky this year, and I understand that his popularity rating in Kentucky is way down. There's a very good possibility that he could be knocked out, which would be a big plus for the country. Get rid of McConnell and get rid of the incumbent in the White House, which I think we'll do. It's going to be interesting to see what happens after the election if he concedes graciously or if he hangs on and claims it's a fraud, wants everything recounted, surveyed, if he's going to be able to believe that he's been rejected by the country. And will he leave on the 20th? Well, he's president right up till 12 noon on January 20th, but 1 minute after 12, he's just a private citizen. So if he's still in the White House by then, he's trespassing. And the new president can have him arrested. So we'll see how that plays out. On the Democratic side, two candidates have dropped out. One is the former governor of Colorado, Governor Hickenlooper, and he is probably going to run for the U.S. Senate. There's a Senate seat now controlled by a Republican that'll be up for grabs in 2020, and Governor Hickenlooper, who has served 2 terms as governor of Colorado, also as former mayor of Denver, is eyeing that seat, and I think he'd be a very, very strong candidate. And with his popularity in Colorado, he would probably win it. There will be, before the next Democratic Forum in September, which I believe is going to be held in Houston, there should be a few more dropping out along the way. I think I saw on Channel 3 News where there's something like 7 Democrats campaigning in New Hampshire over the weekend. Probably none of the 7, or most of the 7, will not make it. I think they probably will be gone. And this process, of course, is going to be whittling on down. Now, whether there will have to be 2 Democratic forums in September, or whether it will be whittled down enough so that they can have 1, remains to be seen. But with Governor Hickenlooper out, I would expect there will be 2 or 3 more, or possibly even as many as 7 more, dropping out in the month of September. You know, you have to look at your ratings. And you need money to run a campaign. Well, the big bucks are not going to be there if your rating is not high enough. There are very, very few people that financially want to back a loser. And so if your rating is, say, 2 or less, chances are you're not going to make it. And it would be foolish to waste any more time running for an office that you haven't got the chance of a snowball in hell of getting. Right now, as I look at the Democratic field, as I've said before, I think the strongest ticket the Democrats could put out right now would be Joe Biden for president and Senator Kamala Harris of California for vice president. You know, Senator Harris, every man can be very, very thankful that they're not her husband. I would imagine she'd be kind of tough to live with. No question, she's very, very outspoken. She speaks her mind, speaks her piece. So, but I think she'd be a great running mate for Joe Biden. First of all, Joe knows how to work both sides of the aisle. He's been in Congress long enough, he knows how to do that. He was a very good vice president under Obama. He had a very, very active role in the Obama administration. He has been in politics a long time. He knows Washington and how Washington works inside out. He also has the support of labor. That is something Hillary didn't have in 2016. Hillary came across, in my opinion, as sort of a phony. I remember in particular there's one campaign opportunity there where she is sitting down and she's having coffee with a group of truck drivers. And she looked very out of place and very much uneasy. She couldn't relate with them and be part of them. She's entirely different, and you could see that strong difference. And I think that hurt her. At least it hurt her as far as getting the labor vote. That's why she lost Michigan and lost Wisconsin, 2 states that are normally in the Democratic column, and Pennsylvania. I think many of the labor people that bought into Trump's lies in 2016 realize now that he is a liar. He lied his way into the White House, and he's going to be doing it again. Only this time, hopefully, the people have smartened up. They recognize old Fibber Donald for what he is, and will vote him out by a landslide. But Joe Biden is blue collar, and I think he's going to have the support of the working people, and especially the people that out through Pennsylvania and Ohio, some parts of Indiana and Illinois, the so-called Rust Belt. Trump was going to bring that back. Well, he never did, and he never will. It was another one of his cock and bull stories. I think these people realize that they were lied to. And I think they're going to switch over, and they're going to be backing whoever the Democratic candidate is. And I think that strongest candidate would be former Vice President Joe Biden. Well, you're going to say, well, old Joe is 77, 78 years old. Still good enough, still strong enough, still up to it for one term. And if he picks as his running mate somebody like the senator from California, if anything should happen to him, I have every confidence in Senator Harris that she can take over and run this country in the right direction. What does she bring to the ticket? First of all, her gender. Any woman that votes for Trump, there's got to be something wrong with her head. By putting Senator Harris on the ticket, she'd get the women's vote. And there are more women voters in this country than there are men. You know, for some reason, you ladies haven't taken advantage of that difference in numbers. There are more women voters in this country than there are male voters. And I think, you know, Kamala Harris, many of these women that voted for Trump because they couldn't stand Hillary. Hillary turned off a lot of women, probably too many women. They're going to see in Senator Harris a fighter. And they're going to come back and they're going to vote for the Democratic ticket. Second of all, she's African American. Many of the folks that supported Obama in 2008 and 2012 couldn't bring themselves around to voting for Hillary in 2016. And they sat on their hands. I think it was Senator Harris on the ticket. They're going to turn out and they're going to vote. And they're going to vote in big numbers. And she's fluent in Spanish. The Hispanic vote, very, very important to the Democratic ticket. The fastest growing segment of our population is Hispanic. And it's just a matter of time before we have a Hispanic president. I don't know if it'll happen in my lifetime because I think, you know, the age I am, my lifetime is very, very limited. You know, you gotta face reality. So I probably don't think I'll be around long enough, at least, you know, this side of the sod, to see a Hispanic president, but it is coming. Just as we had a Catholic president, we had an African American in Barack Obama. Matter of time, we're going to have a female president. I would say after Joe Biden, he probably will be a one-term president. I wouldn't be surprised if Senator Harris, or Vice President Harris, will succeed him and be our first woman president. I think she'd do a darn good job. Certainly, she'd do a much better job than that airhead that Senator John McCain made the mistake of picking back in 2008. I'm talking about Sarah Palin. And you talk about an airhead. There's no way she could have run the country. And I think that was John McCain's biggest mistake. I've been a great admirer of John McCain. He's one of our great American patriots. But when he ran for president in 2008, he made a terrible mistake. And that's when he picked an airhead like Sarah Palin to be his running mate. I think if he'd had a stronger running mate, he might have been elected. But once people got to know Sarah Palin and saw her on TV, they said, no way do we want this lady calling the shots in the White House. She was a bigger dummy than the one we got there now. Although I'd say it's a toss-up. So we look to the future, and we have to pay very, very special attention to what's going on in the stock market right now. Financially, the country is headed in a downward trend. Now, of course, the nincompoop in the White House said, oh, no, it's not me, not my policies. It's other people that are setting interest rates, things like that. That's what's causing it. Now, you know Harry Truman, when he was president, he had a sign went on his desk. He says, the buck stops here. And that is very, very true with that particular office. So while the current incumbent wants to take credit for the economic boom we're having right now, he's also going to have to take credit for causing the huge depression that is going to be setting in a year or two. You know, looking back in history, and I know in Vermont Calvin Coolidge is reverenced, but it was the policies of Warren Harding and Calvin Coolidge that set the stage for the Great Depression of 1929. Herbert Hoover was president, but when the Great Depression hit, his Republican policies, he was too mired in his Republican policies to know how to turn it around, to know how to pull the country out of it. And it cost him the election in 1932, when Franklin Roosevelt, the governor of New York State at that time, was elected 32nd president of the United States. Now, Franklin Roosevelt, even though he was born to privilege, and you consider him maybe a conservative, was actually an extreme liberal. And I know there's a lot of criticism of extreme liberalism today. But liberalism in the 1930s worked. Roosevelt came in with all kinds of ideas of creating jobs. He did that with the CCC, the WPA, Works Progress Administration, the Civilian Conservation Corps. He also did it by pushing through Congress the Wagner Act. Now, people are saying, what's the Wagner Act? Well, the Wagner Act set a work week at 40 hours. Anything over 40 hours, got paid time and a half. Work a holiday, got double time. Came in under the Wagner Act. 2 weeks paid vacation. Came in under the Wagner Act. Insurance, paid for jointly by your employer and you. Came in under the Wagner Act. The most important thing that came in under Franklin Roosevelt was Social Security and a number of other retirement plans. Prior to Social Security, what happened to folks when they got old and they couldn't work and they got sick? They went to the poor farm. We had a poor farm here in Rutland. It's up where the high school is now. There's a cemetery up beyond the high school where a number of the folks, old folks, didn't have any family. They're living on the poor farm. That's where they died, and that's where they were buried. And this was all over the country. Every town had an overseer of the poor. And that was to take care of these poor folks, either put them in a poor farm or see if there's a family member to take care of them, or else they were homeless. They died out in the street. Social Security ended that. And this came in under a liberal president, Franklin Roosevelt. A lot of things Roosevelt got voted down on. But he was trying and he was working, and he did bring the country on the verge of coming out of the Depression. What finally brought us out of the Depression, of course, was World War II. No question about that. Well, we look back, we see things now we take for granted. Came in the 30s. The country didn't have it before that. Now we have retirement plans. Harry Truman followed up by desegregating the armed forces, by establishing the Department of Defense, by strengthening NATO and establishing one in the South Pacific, CEDO, which has kind of gone out of business now. He also established the Air Force Academy, set up the Air Force as an independent service. So with that, may Almighty God in His infinite wisdom continue to bless these United States of America. Have a great week, and we'll see you all next week.